The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. Today is Monday, November 11th, 2019. There's a lot for me to cover. So many things happened over the weekend that I probably need to do 4 shows today, but I have to pick my spots. And I will cover what's happening in Bolivia. I will cover that as the week goes along with the military coup against the democratically elected Evo Morales. The American-backed military coup. We will cover that as the week goes along. But two things, very distinct things happened over the weekend that I have to discuss because it is it painted a picture. 2 different things happened over the weekend that painted a picture for me that I have to convey to you. Number one, I want to stress that anyone who is still telling you that identity politics don't matter, they are morons that will cost you the election. Thankfully, and we don't know fully what's going on in campaigns until unless you have a relationship with people in campaigns. And, I might know a couple people, but thankfully I see Bernie Sanders doing better than he did in 2016 when that narrative was pervasive, not only on the outside of the campaign, but 100% on the inside of the campaign. On the inside of the campaign, 2016, they did not pay attention to the African-American outreach team, the people who were trying to tell them this is what you need to do to win. This is what you need to do to win the black vote. This is what you need to do. This is the positioning that you need to take. It just didn't happen. And what happened? Well, we saw in South Carolina in 2016, Hillary Clinton got 86% of the black vote. Bernie Sanders got 14% of the black vote. That was in South Carolina. In the overall primaries, Hillary Clinton got 75.9% of the black vote, and Bernie Sanders got 23.1% of the black vote. So honestly, anyone who's telling you that identity doesn't matter, they are completely imbecilic and going to cost you the election, because it's impossible to win a Democratic nomination without the black vote. Folks have been telling you that. And the problem was internal with the Sanders campaign. I mean, there's articles written about it, that the problems were internal. And, even Bernie, he was stubborn. He's a stubborn old guy who was basically you take it or leave it. Bernie has that attitude, take it or leave it. Well, black folks left it in 2016. Now, fast forward to 2020, 2019, it seems like he's doing better. But if you want to answer the question of why so many black organizers and former staffers who supported him in 2016 are no longer supporting him, and you start having the conversations with the people on that 100 Women X, and you start talking to old campaign staffers, the story is the same. The story is exactly the same. Their experiences with people who didn't understand the importance of the black vote. I bring that up, and so they moved on. Here's what's doubly problematic in 2019. Of course, you have the question of whether or not the internal politics of the Sanders campaign has resolved the question of how important the black vote is, right? I think they should very well have learned their lesson. I don't necessarily agree with their approach, according to the New York Times, that they're doing celebrity things / social media. They're influencers. I absolutely disagree with that social media influencer thing at the very end. If you 100% have to have the stakeholders, the influencers on the ground. And I see that he's doing that in South Carolina, which is great. So it looks as though they may have learned their lesson, but that remains to be seen, because ultimately it does involve writing checks. It ultimately involves a budget decision. Like, are you going to put enough resources there? Are you going to put the appropriate amount of resources? Are you going to mirror what you do in other communities, in the black community? And that's the best place as any to make my broader point. The Republican Party is throwing everything that they have at getting the black vote. Well, let me correct that just a little. Not necessarily getting the black vote, because most black people know over the last 50 years since the realignment that we haven't necessarily been voting for Democrats. We've been voting against Republicans because Republicans at the point of the realignment became the party that absolutely wanted to restore Jim Crow, that absolutely has been diligently working against our voting rights, that absolutely has been still the party of the Confederate flag waving party, who wants the South to rise again. So black folks have been consistently voting against the Republican Party. And so now the Republicans have finally found a strategy that doesn't require them to give up their racism, but allows them to chip away at the black voting bloc that has gone like 80-90% with the Democratic Party since 1964. And that is, we don't have to change our racist ways. All we have to do is point out that the Democrats aren't doing anything for you. And my friends, that's not necessarily untrue. That is not necessarily untrue. And we can see that play itself out. The best example is by how many resources Republicans are throwing at this issue and the timidity of the Democrats to throw money at this issue in a way that shows that we understand how important the black vote is. If the Democrats lose 5 to 10% of the black vote, whether they go to Trump or not, or just stay home, Donald Trump gets reelected. Period. That's the general election. In the primaries, whoever is out organized in the black community wins. Period. Just ask Sanders' team in South Carolina. Just ask Sanders' team in the general primary, across all the primaries and caucuses in 2016. It may bother some people that the black vote is that important, but that's just your problem. I can't tell you if that bothers you. Too bad. The Democrats should not have built a coalition that was so dependent on like 80-90% of the black vote. And now Republicans have the perfect strategy. All they have to do is like, listen, okay, you don't like us. You're not going to vote for Donald Trump because he's a white supremacist. But why are you voting for Democrats? What have they done for you? They do nothing for you, right? They're going to get Candace Owens out there, who they made a star for this very purpose. Even more so, let's go one step further. Conservative investors from the Republican Party are pouring millions of dollars into a new project coming out in January called the Black News Channel. Now, the Black News Channel is going to be pro-black, just a very specific type of pro-black, a conservative, pro-capitalist black. So they're going to have the language of radicalism. Republicans are going to let them go out there and talk about black power and talk about the importance of the black community. And they're not going to ask. They will never ask those Negroes on the Black News Channel that is coming out in January, completely funded by conservatives. They're never going to tell them, like I was told by so-called progressive media outlets, that you're covering race too much. You think conservatives are going to make that mistake? No, they're going to let that channel be as black as it wants to be, as long as they point out one important fact. That the Democratic Party isn't necessarily doing anything for the black people anyway. And can I tell you, that sentiment resonates with a large percentage of the black community. And the more that sentiment is heard, the more it resonates. And so if you don't have money invested in the black community to counteract that, you're going to lose a percentage. You're not going to lose the black vote. I mean, come on. 80%, 90% for Barack Obama. You're not going to lose the black vote. But if you lose 5%, man, in an election that is as close as our general elections are, you lose the election. And I don't care if you're Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden, God forbid. You're just not. And this is why Pete Buttigieg doesn't stand a damn chance in hell. He's polling like 0% with the black community. So I want to reiterate this. Anyone telling you that identity politics doesn't matter is a complete, utter, fatuous moron. Because that is exactly why Bernie Sanders lost. And if it bothers you that identity politics matter so much, well, that's a personal problem. I can't help you with that. But I can tell you as a professional that, one, politics matter. The politics side of identity politics, if you're not politicking with us and other people are, you lose. Really simple, right? In terms of, political professionalism, but then also in terms of just human decency, of course, the identities of every community matter. And so to have this conversation in progressive media spaces is annoying, but to see it play out in campaigns is terrifying. Because where you put your money as a campaign absolutely tells you where your priorities are. And so the real question is are the resources being poured into put it this way, the way that Sanders lost South Carolina, I would be doing nothing but pouring everything I had into South Carolina, into the black community. And it looks like they're doing that. In fairness to the Sanders campaign, it looks like they're putting all hands on deck in South Carolina. But they probably need to do more. Because overcoming an 86-14 deficit, you're going to have to do a lot more. You're going to have to do a lot more than social media influencers. You're going to have to you really are going to have to spend the time with the influencers on the ground. High-level celebrity, B-list celebrities, no shade to Killer Mike. That's not enough, man. That's not enough. Let me tell you. And it's not only what's happening on the ground. It's also the media that you're putting out. Because you have to counteract a national narrative that is still that you're still vulnerable in. You're still vulnerable with this national narrative, and that the national narrative is I would say the national narrative of Bernie Sanders having a problem with the black vote can obviously be counteracted by organizing on the ground. And I think first and foremost, the dollars in that campaign need to be put in the hands of black organizers in those communities who believe in Sanders, obviously, and have the relationships. That's first and foremost. I said this on the internet last night on Twitter, put the money into 10 organizers over 500 social media influencers any day when you're running a campaign. But then also the national narrative. You got to have more black folks on your team than Killer Mike. Phil is a friend. I like Phil, and Nina Turner's a friend. I like Nina. She's important and she's great. But and Cornel West, that's a good squad. But I mean, you need Bernie Sanders in the pulpit of every black church as often as possible. You need Bernie Sanders to get some black pastor endorsements. You need Bernie Sanders. These are things that I'm saying. People are like, well, Ben, you should go and consult. No. These are things that his team has already told him. These are things that his team told him in 2016. So the real question is, how good did they learn their lesson from 2016? And it's not just moving away from Sanders. It's not just Sanders, man. It's the entire Democratic infrastructure and ecosystem, from consulting dollars all the way down to outside investors investing in media. We are not just fighting a primary here. We're fighting a new movement from the Republican Party that is well funded, that you have never seen. Democrats, hear me. You have never seen a movement like you're seeing right now, that the Republican Party is doing a full court press to not necessarily get the black vote, but just enough for us to feel like the Democrats aren't doing nothing for us anyway, so F it all. And then when you juxtapose that, my friends, to all the people who I saw move from supporting Sanders to not supporting Sanders in 2016, and you listen to their stories, it's like if the best of us has this problem. This is what hit me like a ton of effing bricks yesterday. If the very best of the Democratic Party has the exact problem that the Republican Party is really cashing in on right now, and that is Democrats aren't doing anything for black folks. If that is literally the exact reason those people who supported Sanders in 2016 and worked on his campaign in 2016 are saying they'll never work with him again. And that's coming from the best of us. Because I honestly don't think anybody else in this campaign who stands a chance of winning, I don't believe that they're going to do better. I have no reason to look at Joe Biden and actually he's just getting the benefit of having name recognition and working with Barack Obama. That's it. But in terms of like, what are they actually doing? What they're doing is they're putting Simone Sanders in a really bad spot to where she has to defend the 94 crime bill. You know? So what are they doing for the black community? I mean, the Democrats, you are giving Republicans exactly what they need to chip off just enough percentage of black voters so that Trump can win re-election. So, may I say this again? Anyone at any level, whether they be an organizer, God forbid, I hope organizers know better. I'm sure they do. Progressive media, independent media, anywhere, I don't care where you find any media personality, and anyone on any of your campaigns, anyone telling you that identity does not matter, which really only comes around when we're talking about black issues, because nobody says that about the LGBTQ community. I don't see it. I don't see people saying that about the LGBTQ community because we're clear about that. But anyone telling you that about the black vote, punch them in the throat, tell them to shut the hell up because we have an election to win and they need to be pouring every cent that they can possibly pour and then some. Whatever you think you can possibly afford to put in the black community, double it. Do that because the Republican Party has all hands on deck, damn near in every community, people out there to do one thing, not to get Donald Trump our vote, but to convince us of something that is not particularly untrue, that the Democratic Party isn't doing anything for us. The Democratic Party is simply not being the full-throated racist that the Republicans are. And for 50 years, black folks have been voting against Republicans and not necessarily for Democrats.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Okay, as always, I want to take the time to thank our patrons, our newest patrons. Special shout out to Sunshine Sherpa. Thank you for becoming a patron. Aaron Holloway, thank you, man, for upping your pledge significantly. I really appreciate that. Special shout out to Nicole Rizzuto. Sorry, I really massacred your last name. I was moving too fast. Nicole Rizzuto, thank you for becoming a patron. And Sammy, thank you for becoming a patron just a few minutes ago. Thanks so much for that. Once we hit 500 patrons, we're bringing the live show back. With live callers, video, everything. We're gonna go all out. So go to www.patreon.com/the BPD Show and do it. And it's a high level. I mean, it's like I need 200 more patrons, which we could get in a day if we really really made a really big thing about it. But plenty of time between now and the end of the year to do that. And I put it so high because, well, it takes resources to do this, like I just outlined. Can I double back on something? Speaking of resources, the Black News Channel that is coming out, I need everyone to be aware that it is absolutely a right-wing conservative COINTELPRO, if you ask me. It's an operation to scuttle the black vote and to help Donald Trump get reelected. But the problem is that in general, conservatives understand the value of media, the importance of media. And they, as much as they're telling you that identity politics are wrong, we don't do identity politics. Do you notice that they have Dinesh D'Souza, they have Diamond Silk, they have Terrence, whatever his last name is. They have a Muslim so-called cleric who's a conservative. I mean, they're going through like the infinity gauntlets. They're collecting all the infinity stones of diversity, and they're all doing it in order to have that individual collaborator with white supremacy tell their particular identity that the Democratic Party has done nothing for them. That's the agenda. That's the strategy. While they have you dancing around whether or not identity politics is important, they're playing identity politics. That is a master stroke of political genius. I have to honestly stop and pause and look in awe at how brilliantly Machiavellian Republicans are. They've got you, Democrats, running away from identity politics while they're embracing it and pouring millions of dollars into it. This is kind of dawning on me as I'm saying it. Like I kind of just had a open stream of consciousness on this one, but really, that's literally what they're doing. They have Democrats. This is what they do. This is political jujitsu. It's brilliant. They have Democrats worried about the deficit, running after cutting budgets. All the last couple of Democrats, they've been so proud of cutting the deficits. And that's because Republicans have pushed you into being worried about deficits while they sit there and run it up into the trillions of dollars every single time like clockwork. Come on. I cannot be the only person in the country who sees that the Republican Party does this. I mean, everybody talks about the deficit part, but you're missing what they're doing in terms of identity politics. In terms of identity politics, they are literally playing it masterfully. They're giving everyone their space to be so long as you protect the white male Christian power structure. As long as your politics protect it, or at least if you don't protect it, don't threaten it. So long as you do that, hell, go out there and be as pro-black as you want to be. They have mastered the art of identity politics. Meanwhile, they got you chasing your tail saying, oh, it's not about identity. You know, we don't really need to talk about this black stuff and all this kind of crap. I honestly said this in the last segment, and I'll move on to something else. I'm still thanking the patrons. I haven't even moved on to the next. But I think we are in for a shock because for 3 years straight, Republicans have been investing in getting or depressing the black vote. They try to depress it by disenfranchising, but, we're starting to win cases and we're starting to just over-register people. But now they're like, okay, well, we can help them self-disenfranchise. Maybe they'll never vote for us. But if we pour enough money into this identity thing, they won't vote for Democrats. Meanwhile, they convince you that you should never talk about identity. I will go over in great detail what's happening in Bolivia on tomorrow on another episode, but I do want to just give some basic commentary about what's happening. And this is a part of a global right-wing movement where they have solidarity around religious fundamentalism. They have solidarity around capitalism, unfettered capitalism, with like zero regard. I mean, when we say unfettered, I'm talking about they will see the world burn just to not have to pay 1% more in taxes. They have solidarity there. They have solidarity with police states. They absolutely have no problem with oppressing marginalized communities. Yesterday, I saw an article that the U.S. sided with Iraq and Saudi Arabia, condemning or refusing rather to condemn people getting the death penalty because they're gay. The United States of America refused to sign a UN resolution condemning someone getting the death penalty because they're gay. So they're solidarity. They have their own version of a world order, and that world order is one where, hey, we get to come to your backyard. We won't attack you, Saudi Arabia, but we'll allow you to wage a war in Yemen and here, buy our bombs in order to wage that war. There's solidarity around, and when you look at the holistic view of this worldview, it's probably one of the clearest times that you could honestly say we are engaged in a fight of good versus evil. But we are dealing with an opposition that is completely and wholly inadequate. Here's what I mean. I remember watching a documentary about the impeachment against Bill Clinton, the impeachment of Bill Clinton. And it just shows you how Machiavellian it was, how they just, made something out of nothing. And it was actually the Ken Starr report was what it was about, more so than the impeachment. It was the Ken Starr report, and how the Ken Starr report was really nothing but innuendo and salaciousness, blah, 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 blah. And the video really revealed to me just how devious Republicans are. This was a long time ago. But Bill Clinton was featured in that documentary, and he got on stage and he didn't address it in terms of the deviousness and the Machiavellianism of Republicans. He said, we just have a disagreement in how we see the world. You could see that train of thought of just saying, oh, we just disagree with each other. That carried all the way from that point, which is around 2003. I think I saw that documentary, all the way through the Obama administration, all the way through to now. You have even people like Pete Buttigieg and even Joe Biden who are talking about our problems as if they're merely just disagreements, when in reality, we're dealing with a global right-wing white supremacist movement that has solidarity around oppression of marginalized groups, religious fundamentalism, and unfettered extreme capitalism to the detriment of the entire globe. That's not a disagreement. That's damn near a call to war. And if we don't realize what we're fighting against, well, I mean, why should I? See, I'm even mincing my words. I said damn near a call to war. They just enacted a military coup. And we don't even know if the democratically elected president is going to make it out alive. It's moving fast, so you may have that answer by the time you listen to this podcast. But at the time I'm recording this podcast, we don't know. I mean, there are so many ways that they are committing violence, literal murders, assassinations across the globe in the name of shoring up this right-wing global hegemony. And if we on the left, no, strike that. We on the left know what time it is. If we don't get an opposition that understands that this is not a disagreement, this is a war, an ideological war, a political war, an economic war, and they are willing to wage that war violently. They are waging that war with literal violence. And we are still on our side trying to figure out if we can use harsh language, like I just did in this effing podcast. Like I literally just minced my words so that I don't use too harsh of language in the face of people using violence. That is the problem. That is how we're losing. And if we don't fix that and get opposition in power that understands that this is not a disagreement, this is a war, then we're going to always be on the receiving end of not just harsh policies, but actual violence against communities that would dare challenge that right-wing authoritarianism that's spreading across the globe.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.